Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at leadership principles that were forged in some of the most intense environments imaginable.
Absolutely. We're talking about the cockpit of an F-18, the briefing rooms at TOPGN, and even, ground combat in Ramadi.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really pull out the lessons from one person's incredible career.
That's right. We're talking about Dave Berke. He was a Marine Corps officer, a TOPGN instructor, a forward air controller on the ground in Iraq.
And he commanded the very first F-35B squadron. The guy's flown 4 different modern fighters. It's unreal.
It is. But the goal here isn't just to talk about his resume. It's to find those universal principles, the mindsets, the actions that work anywhere.
Whether you're leading a team of pilots or, say, an R&D department.
Exactly. And it all seems to start with the internal battles, the fight against your own ego, and just accepting total responsibility.
Okay, so let's start there. Right at the beginning of his career at the basic school for Marine officers.
Yes. So you have a class of 250 brand new officers.
And they're all told there are only just two pilot slots available.
Can you imagine? The competition was just ferocious. He says his initial focus was completely self-centered.
It had to be, right? It was all about his class rank.
Totally. Everything was about acing the tests, being the most fit, because that's how you got the slot. It was all about his goal.
But that kind of laser focus on yourself, it can create some pretty big blind spots.
It did, and his peers saw it right away. There was this critical moment in a peer review.
Where the instructor just reads the feedback out loud?
Yeah. And the observation was, Lieutenant Berke would be one of the best Marines in the platoon if he didn't already think that he was.
Ooh, that's a gut punch.
A huge one. And it forces this moment of, brutal self-awareness. He realized his ego wasn't just pushing people away.
It was making him a worse leader.
Precisely. So the fix wasn't about changing what he did, not at first. It was about changing his intent.
Okay, so what does that look like?
It meant he stopped trying to prove he was the best and started actually helping the team. He started seeing that his personal success was, irrelevant if the team didn't benefit.
So he's the one carrying the heavier machine gun on patrols or cleaning extra gear for his squad.
Exactly. Subordinating the self to the team. That's the foundation.
But then we see the flip side of that coin later on in Ramadi, a much more dangerous situation.
Much more. He's an Anglyco forward air controller, and he and his radio operator, Mo, get caught in an ambush.
In the meaty part of a crossfire sandwich, as he puts it.
Yeah. But the key to that whole disaster was what happened right before the chaos.
The mistake.
The mistake, which was inaction. They hear the mortars coming in, that whoosh, ba-boom.
A sound you don't forget.
But based on his experience, he just writes it off. He thinks, it's just another distant, inaccurate mortar. He assumes it's nothing.
And so he doesn't move the team. He doesn't call for support. He just waits.
He just waits. And then the machine guns open up from both sides, and they're pinned down. The window to act just slams shut.
By not acting, he created what he calls a leadership vacuum.
And he gave control over to the enemy. He said his big realization, lying there with no options left, was that every problem is a leadership problem. Inaction is a choice to let someone else decide your fate.
Which is a devastating lesson to learn, especially when it led to the death of one of his Marines, Chris Leon.
It brings that idea of ownership into really sharp focus.
Yeah.
It goes beyond extreme ownership, taking responsibility for past mistakes.
This is something different. Preemptive ownership.
That's the advanced class. It's not about what went wrong. It's about seeing what could go wrong and stopping it before it starts. The failure in Ramadi was a failure to prevent the chaos.
I like your analogy of the car being out of gas. Someone in the family texts you, thanks for leaving the car on empty.
Right. And, you didn't drive it last, so it's easy to just get defensive.
Wasn't me.
Exactly. But preemptive ownership asks a different question. It asks, could I have solved this problem before it ever affected my partner? It's not about blame. It's about seeing that low fuel light and just fixing it so the team or the family can keep moving.
Which means you're constantly fighting against complacency. And that takes us to TOPGN.
Right. The story of the BFM Basic Fighter Maneuvers dogfight against his training officer, a guy named Trim.
And at this point, he's an expert, right? Flying F-18s, F-16s. He's at the top of his game.
He is. But TOPGN is designed to find your weaknesses no matter how good you are.
Yeah.
So they go up one-on-one.
First 3 fights are a wash.
A total stalemate. But in the 4th fight, he gets the advantage. He's in the position he wants to be in. He knows exactly how he's going to win.
He assumes the outcome.
He assumes, and that's the mistake. Trim just disappears. And the next thing he knows, Trim is 1,000 feet right behind him, in a perfect position for a kill shot.
Aim over.
Instantly. And in the debrief, Trim tells him, "You got complacent and you know it. You just didn't consider all the possibilities."
He didn't push the jet to its absolute limit.
He didn't. He got comfortable. And complacency blinds you. It stops you from seeing risks that are right in front of your face.
And you connect this to a really tragic story. The electrician named Joe, who was electrocuted.
Everyone called it a freak accident, but it wasn't. The investigation showed that things had changed. There had been excessive rain.
Which saturated the ground.
Exactly. So the old safety protocols, the ones that had worked for years, were suddenly obsolete. Complacency let everyone assume things were fine, but the environment had changed. A good leader is always awake to that one small thing that changes the entire risk calculation.
So to stay awake, you need another skill, detachment, which he learned in the Hilo Dunker.
The Dilbert Dunker, yeah. It's basically a simulated cockpit in a cage that they strap you into, plunge you underwater, and flip you upside down.
And sometimes blindfold you for good measure.
It's pure panic induction. And at first, he completely failed. He was flailing, hitting his head, losing his goggles. His lungs were burned.
It's just pure emotion running the show.
Total emotion. And his movements were just making things worse.
So what was the breakthrough?
The breakthrough was realizing he had to stop. Just stop all movement, get control of his emotions, and then find the fixed reference points inside the cage.
The things that don't move.
The handles, the levers. That's detachment. It's the ability to sideline the fear and the anger so you can think clearly.
But it's also about seeing the problem from other people's perspectives.
Absolutely. When you're blindfolded and three of you have to get out of the same small door, you can't just panic and push. You have to think about the person next to you, or nobody gets out.
You saw this in a business setting with a sales manager, Mary?
Yeah. Mary was furious because the customer success team was giving out discounts that hurt her team's commissions.
Her first reaction was just anger.
Pure emotion. But once she detached, she could actually go and ask the head of customer success, Jason, why it was happening.
And what was the reason?
It was strategic. Jason explained that a tiny discount was guaranteeing they'd keep a huge client, which meant massive repeat business down the line. Detachment let her see the big picture for the company, not just her team's numbers.
This all shifts into the relational side of things. When he came home from Ramadi, those combat communication habits, they didn't just go away.
No, they were deeply ingrained. For 14 years, he had been the primary communicator.
The flight lead, the TOPGUN instructor, the vehicle commander in the Humvee.
In those situations, you have to be direct, you have to be concise. There's no time for chatter. And the stress of war just magnifies that habit 100 times over.
And it all came to a head almost immediately after he got home?
Less than an hour. He's in the car, and his wife and mother are just chatting. Normal conversation.
Idle chatter.
And for him, it was an unbearable distraction. He just snapped involuntarily and yelled, "Stop talking."
Wow.
He'd basically turned his family car into his wartime Humvee. He was the commander, and his wife was just a passenger with no voice.
So what was the fix? How do you come back from that?
It sounds simple, but it was incredibly hard. He just had to listen more. He had to consciously, deliberately change that ratio of talking to listening.
And the data on this is really clear, right? In organizations, what's the #1 thing people want from their leaders?
Overwhelmingly, it's listening. The best leaders listen. When you're the one always talking, you miss things. And ironically, people stop hearing you.
But if you talk less, when you finally do speak,
Everyone listens. It's powerful. And for him, it helped save his marriage. He realized his wife was actually the better leader in that moment because she was listening to him while he was processing all this trauma he didn't even know he had.
the opposite of that ego-driven communication is putting the team first. You have an incredible story about a carrier landing in a snowstorm.
Oh yeah, one of the most terrifying things in naval aviation. It's 2 a.m., a blizzard, and the landing signal officer, the LSOs, make the call. 99 taxi lights on.
Which means visibility is basically zero.
Zero. You're alone, low on gas, miles from land. When he finally hooked the wire trapped on the deck, he said the feeling was just pure euphoria. He thought, I just performed a miracle.
A feeling of individual triumph.
They didn't last long.
Right.
As soon as the adrenaline wore off, he looked around and realized his miracle was only possible because of 5,500 other people. The LSOs, the maintenance crews, the sailors on the deck.
The entire team.
The entire team, working anonymously. A leader owns all the failures, but they have to deflect all the credit for success. If you take the praise, you're lying to yourself and stealing from your team.
There's a great business example with Teresa's pharmaceutical company.
Right. They were celebrating the executive team's success every year, but totally ignoring the lab techs and support staff whose work made it all possible.
So they changed the annual conference.
They did. They started including everyone,
Yeah.
acknowledged their contributions, and they saw retention and morale just skyrocket. Good leaders know nothing happens without the team.
Let's shift to the long game. Overcoming resistance to change. He moves from the F-18 to become the only Marine to fly the F-22 Raptor. That transition was not smooth.
Not at all. It was humbling. The F-22 is a completely different beast. Stealth, sensor fusion. His years of combat experience in other jets were suddenly useless.
He was getting beaten in the simulator.
Constantly. By a young Air Force captain, 10 years his junior, his old playbook just didn't work, and his first instinct was just obstinate resistance. He was literally swearing at the simulator.
So he had to swallow his pride.
He had to swallow his ego and listen to the junior guys who actually understood the new technology. Sometimes embracing change means listening to the newest person in the room.
And this connects to a really counterintuitive idea that the pursuit of perfection is actually dangerous.
It is. He learned this in an LSO debrief after a carrier landing, where he got a wave off, meaning he was told to abort the landing.
Why? What did he do?
The LSO showed him he was flying just a little low on his approach. He was doing it on purpose to avoid coming in too high and missing the wire, which is called a bolter.
So he was trying to save his landing grade.
He was trying to salvage a good grade by taking a huge risk. He was hiding a small error by creating a much bigger, more dangerous one.
And the LSO explained the danger of that mindset.
He said, look, if you demand perception from people, they will start to hide their tiny mistakes. And those tiny hidden mistakes, they add up. They accumulate until you have a catastrophe, a ramp strike.
Wow.
The success of naval aviation isn't based on being flawless. It's based on the constant, open, and immediate correction of errors.
Which brings us to the ultimate measure of a leader, their legacy. What happens when they're gone?
The story of the CEO, Jack, is the perfect example. He was a super successful CEO of an engineering firm, and then one day he died suddenly from a massive aneurysm.
Total shock.
A complete tragedy. But his company kept running seamlessly. His team took care of his family. Why? Because Jack had spent years building a decentralized culture. He pushed leadership down. He didn't hoard it.
The goal isn't to be indispensable.
The goal is to make yourself obsolete. The highest calling of a leader is to create more leaders, to build a team that can thrive without you. You work yourself out of a job and into a better one.
This has been an amazing deep dive. It seems the pursuit of being a great pilot started as a very self-centered goal, but the pursuit of being a great leader became noble because it was all about supporting others.
Humility, ownership, detachment, listening, it's all in service of the team.
Correction over perfection, radical decentralization.
Exactly. The final lesson is that slight leadership, not just individual stick and rudder skill, is what matters most. And you now know that perfection is a lie, that real perfection is just the constant correction of small errors.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to consider. What specific small mistake or inefficiency have you been ignoring or maybe even concealing in your professional or your personal life, just assuming it'll work itself out?
And what's the real risk of letting that one single point of complacency continue to kill your team's potential?
Distributors can benefit from the quick cash that accounts receivable factoring can provide. Contact Chris at Versant Funding to get your client funded fast.
This is the brief on critical leadership lessons. You know, the kind learned from high-stakes military experiences. We're diving into the work of former Marine fighter pilot Dave Berke. He took lessons from combat and Top Gun training and turned them into 3 leadership mindsets that honestly apply to anyone. First, humility is non-negotiable. Early in his training, Berke learned technical skill wasn't enough to lead. A peer review hit him hard. It said he'd be one of the best Marines if he didn't already think so. The realization? Genuine humility means putting your ego aside. Leadership fails the moment you put your career goals before the team. Second, detachment is your superpower. In a crisis, emotional reactions are just dangerous. Berke learned this during an intense water survival training, a helicopter crash simulation. In a moment of panic, he lost all control. Effective leadership demands objectivity. You have to detach from fear and anxiety to think clearly under that kind of pressure. And finally, perfection is a lie. In naval aviation, there's no such thing as a perfect carrier landing. When leaders demand it, team members start hiding small, constant errors to avoid criticism. But those hidden issues accumulate, and they risk catastrophic failure, like a ramp strike that's hitting the edge of the flight deck. Good leaders embrace constant, minor corrections instead of demanding the impossible. These mindsets, from controlling your ego to embracing constant correction, are what determine success on any mission.
Companies can fund their growth using the cash accounts receivable factoring can provide. Contact Chris at Versant Funding to learn if your client is a factoring fit. Factoring can meet the cash needs of staffing companies looking to expand. Contact Chris at Versant Funding to learn if your staffing client is a factoring fit.